Welcome to the Connection podcast series. We are sitting with Neil Osment of NOA for part 6, looking at some trends that are affecting us in the global corrugated industry. Neil, welcome back. Thanks for joining us again.
Thank you, Dan.
Neil, I'd like to really look at the hot topic at the moment, and obviously the timing of this recording is perfect. We are off the back of significant price increases in January. The speculation is that those are following through in February for obviously recycled grades. We're also seeing notifications that some of the coated kraft is also going to be going as of early March. But I think what I'd like to do, Neil, is talk to you a little bit about why all of this is happening. So let's start by looking at, what have been the drivers for the current paper sort of shortage that's obviously been taking place since before Christmas.
Sure. Yes, Dan. I mean, in a way, it's been unprecedented. I've talked to people about the last time that we experienced such shortages, and we'd have to go back 40 years or so. So the drivers have been, first of all, an increased demand on e-commerce, and that's come because many people in many countries are at home. So e-commerce packaging had certainly seen an increase and a rise, but it's also seen an early call for extra corrugated in November, and that was quite a jump. And talking to both integrated plants and sheet plants and sheet feeders, they saw an incredible rise in the demand of corrugated generally, such that lead times went out for board, whereas you could get board turned around in a series of days for sheet plants. It was taking several weeks, and actually lead time went out by December time, out to 6 to 8 weeks for board, particularly, as I say, particularly for sheet plants where it was noted. The demand that we've been seeing, and we plot this with, we call it MODI, so e-commerce packaging, we call it MODI. We've been seeing that rising by nearly 10% year on year. So every month that's increasing hugely. So that's been a contributing factor. So demand high. We've also had some restrictions. People have been poorly with COVID. They've had to self-isolate. And that has caused manning to be an issue, both in plants, integrated plants, sheet plants, and paper mills. A few people being off, and man down, and that's these are run lean. And the third is waste collection. So waste collection has been an issue. One, just picking up on that COVID thing that people have been ill, the waste collections, and so waste collection, physically people not being around. And also we've had this rapid change from collection of waste materials from the retailers, where we have an excellent system in place around Europe, where we're now having to collect it from home. So domestic collection, so curbside collection. And we're not quite as efficient. So people are holding on to a cardboard box for 2, 3, 4 weeks, whereas at a retailer, it's used, consumed, and it's straight back into the system. So all of these things have been you might say, a perfect scenario for shortage of materials and an impact on the cost and price of paper, and huge demand for corrugated. So,
well, Neil, it's interesting that you pick up on that point about the recycling, because it was actually even mentioned in the national press, by the BBC, and they picked up on it. And obviously there was a lot of finger pointing at some of the larger online retailers. And they were saying, oh, well, they've just sucked all of the board out of the supply chain. But that's I think that's a little bit unfair. I don't think it's just the e-tailers. But one of the CEOs of one of the big groups actually went out to counter it and just say, look, online retailing has been around for years. This is nothing new. Okay, we're all doing a bit more of it, but I think your point about collection is absolutely spot on, because effectively they're saying as consumers, we are hoarding our corrugated until it makes sense to recycle it.
Yes.
And of course, the supermarkets, as you say, I mean, I think it's DS Smith who say, box to box in 14 days. And that's
Absolutely.
obviously just not happening at the moment.
No, no. I mean, I think we're well known in Europe for recycling. 85% of corrugated, and that's much better than recycling rate than for other products. But in the last year or so, because of the way that we've changed in consuming, a lot more going to homes, a lot more in the home dustbin, then the responsibility on consumers to put this box back into the system, they've not really understood. But I think there's some great publicity that's being undertaken, I know in the UK and by CPI, by FEFCO around Europe, and with ICA actually globally, starting to get the message to consumers saying, please put that box into your trash bin as quick as you can, because it'll help. And that's the important thing, because that's had an impact, as you say, on the materials being short in supply. And it's a classic supply and demand scenario that we're in. There is less supply available and high demand. So the pricing, as you indicated, pricing's gone up. The paper mills have indicated prices up in the first quarter of 2021. And I know that box plants and sheet plants have gone to the marketplace. They have to pass it on. And it certainly looks as though that there's going to be more price rises with demand as it is. So yeah, that, as you rightly say, driven by people not recycling, it's this current scenario that we see.
So, right, time to ask you to polish off your crystal ball here, Neil, because I mean, if you were to look at the shape of the next 2 to 3 months, how do you see it all panning out?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I mean that's what Noah is all about. I mean, crystal ball gazing and trend analysis and trend review. And in fact, we have a report out which we've publicised the details briefly in IPBI in February, and we've got some in-depth details in that. But really, the headline for me is I think the perfect storm as well was Brexit. That contributed towards the high demand in Q4. We're seeing the shakeout, let's say, of the effect of Brexit coming through in Q1. So the first thing is there was high stock building in Q4. That stock building's not happening, so that's eased the demand curve. The second thing is a lot of product was being affected in this quarter in particular, but a little bit in Q4 through ports in mainland Europe and in the UK. So that hasn't gone away. There's a lot of paperwork to be filled out, and all the feedback that I have, and as you know, I do a lot of work with a company that sells B2C, and at the moment it's sending product into mainland Europe, and actually product is being held up in places like Bristol or Northampton as they're waiting to have customs clearance. And when I know, talking to colleagues in mainland Europe, it's the same scenario there. So there's actually this sort of paperwork that everybody's trying to understand. So that will work its way through in Q1 as well. So I can see things easing there. And people were talking about quite a lot of ghost orders in the system. So people have ordered knowing that lead times have gone out to nearly 2.5, 3 months. So they've been putting in orders for in December, which might have been in February or March. And a number of those orders will probably not be needed. So I think there's ghost orders in the system. So in Q1, it'll shake its way out. But there's no doubt corrugated has grown. But 2019 versus 2020 has grown by 1.5 to 2%. So overall, corrugated demand has been good, but it's a heck of a spike in Q4, and I think it's calming down for the next 2 or 3 months.
Now, Neil, I want to come back very sensitively to pricing, because as an external observer on the industry, what I can't do the maths on this at the moment, is when we look and see how much new capacity has come on during the second half of 2020. Now, I'm talking specifically now about recycled papers being produced in Europe. When you look at that new capacity that's come on stream, um, how do you view it in terms of this extraordinary situation of this supply and demand balance? Because obviously there's a load of paper out there. So why have we got all of these moves on pricing at the moment?
Yeah, it's a very good point. I mean, actually, have we got a load of paper, or have we got a load of paper making capacity? And I think actually back to our discussion about is recycled paper or is waste paper going into the system to allow us to make all that paper? Is the potential that those mills have being realized? And I think not, and that's a big part of the driver. You're absolutely right, and this is why I'm confident that this peak in demand and this unusual shortage of materials is a short-term thing, and that things will come back to some degree of normality. There's no doubt waste paper is a crucial part of this, and actually some waste paper not being collected, we talked about, but some waste paper has been going out of mainland Europe, out of all of Europe. So there's been a shortage of materials available. People in other parts of the world have been paying higher prices for that, for OCC. And that's starting to level out again. So I think there's the base material to be able to realize the capacity of the mills. And there's no doubt there's a lot of recycled capacity in the marketplace. So again, I'm sure that production will come and will keep up with demand, and demand is pretty astounding. Growing at 1.5–2% in the industry. That's high for a mature industry. That's high. So it takes a bit of a while just to flex to that. But I'm sure material will become available for those recycled mills.
So Neil, let's now have a look at the effect that COVID has actually had on our industry. And obviously, we've talked in previous podcasts about the direct impact that it's had on the manufacturing sector in terms of, workers out of the factory, et cetera, et cetera. But do you think that, or how do you see that sort of long-term effect on corrugated demand? What impact is COVID going to have?
I think it's likely to have a highly significant one. I was saying that corrugated demand 1.5–2%. So there's a gradual increase overall, but different market sectors are fared so differently. So if you're in, let's say, predominantly industrial, then those market sectors tend to be a little bit less buoyant. If you're in the, not just in e-commerce, but if you're in food and drink, those market sectors have been very buoyant. So depending on which market sector you're in is vitally important to know. And if you're not analysing where your demand is coming from within your box plant, within your sheet plant, within your business, you could be in some trouble. And it's one of the things we've said. We've written a report very recently. In fact, it's been quite a feeding frenzy, which we've been delighted with people subscribing towards our report, because within that we break down what market sectors are faring well, what market sectors are not faring so well. And we've got some market sectors growing by 125%. Well, that's great as long as you've got the machinery and you've got the ability to cope with that demand. But if you're not in that market sector, and some people that we've been talking to have been saying, well, actually 2020 was a sort of a 75% versus 2019 year. So, a quarter down in turnover. So some people have fared badly, and that's to do with the depression of certain market sectors they're in, whether it's automotive, aerospace, obviously, those sectors have not fared well. So it's about identifying what are the rising stars, for want of a better description, and what are the ones that are the dogs.
And Neil, do you think that, permanent is rather a harsh word, but do you feel that this is a semi-permanent change that the industry is now going to have to live with?
Yeah, I think the great thing about corrugated is it's so resilient. Corrugated has adapted. I've been in the industry for 40, 45 years, and I've just seen so many peaks and jumps in demand for different areas. But collectively, corrugated has fared well and has been an excellent product for ongoing customer demand. So we're highly flexible, highly adaptable, resilient industry. But COVID will definitely have a permanent effect in certain market sectors. There's no doubt, and you just need to look at the jobs that people are now having. So there's certain jobs that people wouldn't have considered. So delivery drivers for online food and drink companies for the retailers. Well, the huge demand for that role. Now that's an obvious one, but there's other roles that there's demand for now, and there's other roles where other jobs where people won't be employed, and there's there'll be 20% of the jobs that used to be in place. So you can see it in that very stark way, and it's the same way for demand for corrugated. And as I said, you need to identify what's the right product as well as the right market sector. Some of the customers I've been talking to have been saying huge demand for die cut, huge demand. We've talked about this before about taping. So have you got the right equipment and machinery to satisfy the new demand? And that's what's happening with COVID. And one other thing for COVID is there's been a lot of new companies that have really flourished, small businesses, and it's particularly, we see this particularly in the sheep plant sector, where a lot of new companies who might have ordered literally 1,000 boxes a year are now ordering tens of thousands of boxes a month. And that's a lot of the customers that we deal with are saying there's been a phenomenal increase in small, medium-sized enterprises coming to the market for corrugated and really flourishing. So there's a lot of new companies that are being looked after by sheep plants at the moment, and no doubt by integrated companies as the months and years go on. So the change, I think, is a permanent one, and you need to be identifying who are the key players.
So Neil, I'd like to sort of wrap up this particular podcast just with your thoughts. I haven't been in the industry quite as long as you. I think coming up 25 years. I'm coming up 25 years, and of course, when I joined, it was I think there was probably somewhere in the region of 110 corrugators running in the UK. Today, it's significantly less than that. At that time, it was probably in excess of 450, maybe 500 sheep plants. And those numbers today are radically different. Obviously, we've seen in the last couple of weeks, there's been announcements of acquisitions, particularly with Europeans coming in and buying plants in the UK. But with this growth in that sort of smaller to medium type of customer who's sort of trying to move from 1,000 pieces a month to 10,000 pieces a month, do you think this opens opportunities for the sort of the rebirth of what I call really small niche sheep plants?
I think the opportunity is definitely there. We're already seeing. In our report, we demonstrate that it's to just over 200 sheep plants. As you say, it used to be 400 25 years ago. But actually, amongst those 215 sheep plants, we've seen about 20 new sheep plants in that sector. And the second thing is we've seen some people growing phenomenally. So it's a really positive area to be. It's a very active area to be in. And depending on the specialism that you've got as a sheep plant, then you could be doing very well. One of the other things that we've seen, and in the article in IPBI, it shows that the growth of one particular integrated company who've got into the sheep plant market, who have bought 4 or 5 significant sheep plants and have grown their share of the sheep plant market, and they are really doing well. So if there was a company to follow, it's Smurfit Kappa, that they have invested heavily into the sheep plant market and are benefiting. And as you say, there are a number of foreign companies, Schumacher being one, and a number of others who are coming in and are in discussions at this moment. So the sheep plant sector is very attractive for investment. So yeah, come on down.
And Neil, obviously, you mentioned Schumacher there. Obviously, there's also been Klingler has come into the UK market. De Jong with the announcement with the corrugated, and then just literally last week, Solidus Solutions acquiring Heathpack. Do you think that's a little bit of a rearguard action against Brexit?
Oh, I think it's a demonstration that the UK market is a very attractive one. And I think, as you say, there's been a strategic plan by a number of companies to make sure that they don't miss out on the opportunities that the UK market holds. So I think we'll see more of this acquisition by European companies, mainland European.
Well, Neil, thank you ever so much indeed. It's been great to catch up with you. Part 6 done and dusted. And I will look forward to sitting down with you over the next couple of weeks, and let's get number 7 in the can. So Neil, thanks ever so much indeed, and speak soon.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you very much. And thanks to all your readers.